My mother looked me dead in the eye through the FaceTime screen and said my internal bleeding was inconvenient for her schedule because Taylor Swift was about to take the stage. She and my sister had VIP tickets that I paid for. My brother-in-law Tyler laughed in the background and told me to stop being a drama queen. As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, I realized my family did not love me. They only loved what I could provide for them. So while they enjoyed the Eras tour, I decided to erase their access to my bank accounts. By the time the encore was over, they were homeless, and I was finally free. Before I tell you how I destroyed their entitled little world, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the person everyone relies on until you are the one who needs help. My name is Sophia and I am 34 years old. For years I thought being the strong one was a badge of honor, but I learned the hard way that sometimes being strong just makes you an easy target for parasites. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The pain did not knock, it kicked the door down. One minute I was standing at the head of the mahogany conference table, presenting the third quarter financial projections for my firm, and the next minute the world tilted on its axis. It felt like someone had taken a serrated knife and twisted it deep into my lower abdomen. I remember the horrified gasps of my junior analysts as I doubled over and gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. The sleek glass walls of the office blurred as a wave of nausea crashed over me. My assistant rushed to my side asking if I needed water, but I knew water would not fix this. I could feel the warmth spreading, wet and sticky and terrifying. Call 911. I managed to gasp out before my legs gave way and I hit the carpet. The old toy. The next 20 minutes were a blur of siren wails and the metallic taste of fear. The paramedics were efficient, asking rapid-fire questions about pain levels and medical history. Suspected ruptured ovarian cyst with potential internal hemorrhaging, one of them shouted to the driver. The words floated above me like they were happening to someone else. But through the haze of agony, one thought pierced through sharper than the physical pain. Leo and Maya. My 4-year-old twins were at daycare and pickup time was in 45 minutes. The daycare had a strict policy that if parents were late, they charged $5 a minute, and after an hour they called Child Protective Services. I was a single mother and a widow. There was no husband to call. There was only my family. My hand shook uncontrollably as I fumbled for my phone. The screen was blurry, but I knew the number by heart. I called my mother, Brenda. She was my emergency contact. She was the grandmother to my children. Surely this was the moment she would step up. The phone rang and rang. Each ring felt like a hammer to my temple. Finally, she picked up, but before I could speak, a wall of noise assaulted my ears. It was the roar of a crowd and thumping bass. "Hello, Sophia? Speak up, I can barely hear you," my mother shouted. Her voice sounded annoyed, not concerned. "Mom, I am in an ambulance," I wheezed out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. Something ruptured inside me. "They are taking me to emergency surgery. I need you to get the twins." There was a pause on the other end. Not a pause of shock, but a pause of hesitation. I heard her cover the microphone slightly, but I could still hear the conversation. She was talking to my sister Chloe. "She says she is in an ambulance and needs us to get the kids," my mother said. Then I heard Chloe's voice. The sister whose student loans I had paid off. The sister whose car I had bought. "Is she serious right now?" Chloe whined. "The opener is about to finish, and Taylor comes on in 20 minutes. If we leave now, we will get stuck in parking lot traffic and miss the entire first set. Tell her to figure it out." My heart shattered in my chest. The pain in my abdomen was excruciating, but this was worse. This was a cold, freezing sensation that started in my marrow. "Mom, please," I begged into the phone. "I might be bleeding internally. I cannot pick them up. I have nobody else." My mother came back on the line. "Listen, Sophia, do not be so dramatic. You always make a mountain out of a molehill. Remember last year when you had the flu and acted like you were dying? We have been planning this weekend for months. These are VIP floor seats. Do you know how much these cost? Yes, I knew exactly how much they cost because I was the one who paid for them. I had transferred $3,000 to Chloe's account as a birthday gift specifically for this experience. I had bought the tickets that were now being used as a reason to abandon me. Mom, the doctors say it is critical, I whispered, my strength fading. Then a male voice cut through the background noise. It was Tyler, my brother-in-law. His voice dripped with that arrogant condescension that always made my skin crawl. He was a man who had not held a steady job in 2 years, yet always had an opinion on how I lived my life. "Oh my God, Brenda, just hang up on her," Tyler sneered loud enough for me to hear clearly. "She is just jealous. She is not here with us. She probably just has bad cramps. Tell her to call an Uber for the kids and stop ruining the vibe. We are trying to have a family moment here, a family moment." The irony tasted like bile. I was the one paying for the roof over their heads. I was the one paying the lease on the truck Tyler drove. I was the family bank, but I was not considered family enough to be saved. "Sophia, look, just call a service," my mother said, her tone final. "We really cannot leave right now. We will come visit you tomorrow or whenever you are done. Good luck." The line went dead. I stared at the black screen of my phone as the ambulance hit a pothole, sending a fresh jolt of agony through my body. The paramedic looked at me with pity in his eyes. He had heard everything. "Is there anyone else we can call, ma'am?" he asked gently. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall hot and fast. "No," I whispered. "There is no one else." But that was not entirely true. I had money, and in that moment, I realized money was more reliable than blood. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. I navigated to the contact for the elite emergency nanny agency I had used once during a business trip. Their rates were extortionate, triple the normal price for last-minute requests, but they were professional. I dialed the number. Within 3 minutes, I had arranged for a certified nanny to pick up Leo and Maya from daycare. I gave them the security codes. I transferred $500 as a deposit. It was a transaction, cold hard and efficient. "Ms. Williams, we have secured the pickup," the dispatcher said soothingly. "We will take them to your home and stay with them until you are released. Focus on getting better." I hung up the phone as the ambulance doors burst open and the bright lights of the hospital emergency bay flooded my vision. Doctors and nurses swarmed around me, moving with urgency. I was being rushed into surgery alone. My parents were dancing. My sister was drinking champagne. My brother-in-law was laughing at my pain. As the anesthesiologist placed the mask over my face and told me to count backward from 10, I made a vow. I was going into this surgery a daughter and a sister. But if I woke up, I would be something else entirely. I would be a stranger to them. They wanted to enjoy the concert so badly they refused to help me save my children. Fine. I hoped they enjoyed every single second of it, because it was the most expensive concert they would ever attend. It was going to cost them everything. 10, 9, 8. The darkness took me. And in the darkness, I began to plan. When I woke up, the first thing I would ask for was not water or pain medication. I would ask for my laptop. It was time to close the Bank of Sophia, permanently. Waking up from anesthesia is not a peaceful drift into consciousness like they show in the movies. It was a violent clawing back to reality. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass, and my abdomen was on fire despite the heavy painkillers pumping through my veins. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile white room. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision, waiting for a familiar face to materialize in the chair beside my bed. I expected to see my mother holding my hand, or at least looking concerned. I expected to see my father reading a newspaper or my sister Chloe pacing anxiously. But as the room came into focus, I realized the chair was empty. The visitor badge I had pre-authorized for them sat untouched on the bedside table. I was alone. A nurse bustled in, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. She was an older woman with kind eyes, and she gave me a sympathetic smile that hurt more than the surgery. She asked if there was anyone she should call to let them know I was out of surgery. She told me that usually family is waiting in the lobby, but the waiting room was empty. I felt a lump form in my throat that had nothing to do with the intubation tube. I shook my head weakly and lied. I told her they were on their way and were just stuck in traffic. She nodded, but I could see in her eyes that she knew. She had seen this before. The patient who pays the bills but gets none of the love. She handed me my phone, which had been stored in a plastic bag with my personal effects, and told me to press the red button if the pain got worse. Then she left me alone with the device that would confirm my worst fears. My fingers felt heavy and clumsy as I unlocked the screen. The brightness stung my eyes. I had been in surgery for 4 hours. Surely there would be a missed call. A text message asking if I was alive. A voicemail from my mother saying she was worried. I opened my notifications center. It was empty of direct messages. Not a single text from Mom. Nothing from Dad. Nothing from Chloe. But my social media notifications were exploding. I had been tagged in 17 photos in the last 3 hours. I opened the app and my breath hitched in my chest. The first image that loaded was a high-definition selfie of my sister Chloe. She was beaming her face covered in glittery makeup, wearing a custom sequined jacket that I knew cost at least $500. Behind her, the stadium lights were blindingly bright, and the stage was set for the biggest pop star on the planet. But it was the caption that made my blood run cold. It read, "Family is everything." So grateful for my amazing husband Tyler for spoiling us with these VIP floor seats. Best night of my life. Hashtag rich life. Hashtag blessed. I swiped to the next photo. It was a group shot. My mother Brenda was holding a glass of champagne, laughing with her head thrown back. My father Marcus was wearing a new suit, smoking a cigar in the designated smoking area, looking like a king. And there was Tyler, my brother-in-law, the man who had been unemployed for 2 years, standing with his arm around Chloe, looking smug and self-satisfied. They looked radiant, they looked happy, and they looked expensive. I zoomed in on the wristbands they were wearing. Platinum VIP access. I knew the market price for those tickets because I had looked them up when Chloe first mentioned the tour months ago. They were $3,000 each. 4 tickets meant $12,000. Plus the limousine I saw in the background of another photo. Plus the hotel suite they had tagged in their location. The math started clicking in my head with the ruthless efficiency of the CFO I was. 2 weeks ago, my father had called me in a panic. He told me the roof of their house, the house I paid the mortgage on, was leaking severely. He said there was black mold developing, and it was a health hazard for him and Mom. He sent me a quote from a contractor for $15,000. I had transferred the money immediately. I did not ask for a second quote. I did not ask to inspect the damage myself because I was busy closing a merger and I trusted them. I trusted that my parents would not lie about their safety. I trusted that they would not exploit my fear for their health to fund a vanity trip. But looking at these photos, the truth was undeniable. There was no leaking roof. There was no black mold. There was only a $15,000 transfer from my savings account that had miraculously transformed into concert tickets and champagne. I had paid for the very event that was keeping them from being at my bedside. I had financed my own abandonment. I scrolled through the comments. Friends and distant relatives were commenting on how successful Tyler must be to treat the family so well. One aunt wrote that it was so wonderful to see a man taking care of his in-laws. Tyler had liked the comment. He was accepting praise for spending my money. He was playing the role of the provider while the actual provider was lying in a hospital bed with 3 incisions in her stomach, bleeding into a drainage bag. Tears began to stream down my face, hot and angry. This was not the crying of a child who scraped her knee. This was the deep, guttural sobbing of a woman realizing she had been a fool. I thought about Leo and Maya, my sweet twins, who were probably confused about why Mommy was not there to tuck them in. I had to pay a stranger $500 to ensure they were safe because their own grandmother was too busy drinking on my dime to care. I looked at the photo of my mother again. She looked so young and vibrant. When I called her from the ambulance, she sounded annoyed. She had made me feel like a burden for having a medical emergency. She had called me dramatic. She had chosen to believe a lie that I was fine so she would not have to feel guilty about enjoying the party. A new notification popped up. It was a video Chloe had just posted to her story. I clicked on it. The camera panned around the VIP suite. The music was deafening. My mother leaned into the frame and shouted over the noise, "This is what we deserve." Finally, some relaxation. "We work so hard we earned this. You work so hard." The words echoed in my empty hospital room. My mother had not worked a day in 20 years. My father had retired early because I promised to cover their expenses. Chloe worked part-time as a lifestyle blogger, which was code for unemployed, and living off her husband who was living off me. I was the only one working. I was the one working 60-hour weeks. I was the one missing school plays to secure bonuses. I was the one who had practically given myself an ulcer from stress, which likely contributed to my condition. And they were the ones spending the rewards. The pain in my abdomen flared up, a sharp reminder of my physical reality, but the pain in my chest was far worse. It was the death of hope. For years I had told myself that they loved me. I told myself that they were just bad with money, and that I was helping them, because that is what families do. But looking at the timestamps on the photos, I realized they had been posting these while I was under the knife. They did not know if I was alive or dead, and they did not care enough to pause the celebration. I wiped my face with the rough hospital sheet. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was a familiar feeling. It was the same feeling I got before a hostile boardroom takeover. It was the feeling of analyzing a failing asset and deciding to cut losses. My family was a failing asset. They were a liability I could no longer afford to carry. I opened my banking app. My hands were steady now. I navigated to the joint account I shared with my parents, the one I used to deposit their monthly allowance. I looked at the balance. It was significantly lower than it should have been. They had drained almost everything for this trip. I clicked on the transfer history. Cash withdrawals, hotel charges, liquor store purchases. It was all there, a paper trail of their greed. I took a screenshot. Then I took another. I saved every photo from Instagram, every video, every comment where Tyler took credit for the wealth. I built a folder on my phone named Evidence. I lay back against the pillows, listening to the beep of the monitor. The nurse came back in to check on me. She saw the phone in my hand and the tears drying on my cheeks. "Did you get a hold of them, dear?" she asked gently. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life I spoke the absolute truth about my family, without making excuses for them. "No," I said, my voice raspy but firm. "They are busy. But it is okay. I have a lot of work to do." I did not mean work for my company. I meant the work of dismantling the life I had built for them. They wanted the rich life. They wanted to be VIPs. I hoped they enjoyed the view from those seats, because it was the last luxury they would ever experience on my dime. The ATM was officially out of order, and when the hangover hit them tomorrow morning, they would find that the Bank of Sofia had not just closed for the day. It had closed forever. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to visualize the email I would write to my banker the moment the anesthesia wore off completely. It was going to be my masterpiece. The hospital room door creaked open, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over me since I put my phone away. I quickly wiped my eyes and adjusted the bed incline, trying to look less like a patient and more like a mother. Mrs. Higgins walked in first, pushing a double stroller with the practiced ease of a woman who had raised 5 children of her own. Behind the mesh netting, I saw 2 pairs of wide, anxious brown eyes. My heart leaped into my throat. Seeing my twins Leo and Maya was the only medicine that could actually numb the ache in my chest. Mrs. Higgins parked the stroller and unbuckled them, whispering that they needed to be gentle with Mommy. Maya reached me first. She buried her face in the side of the mattress, avoiding the tubes and wires with an instinct no 4-year-old should have to possess. I ran my fingers through her braided hair, smelling the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dust. Leo was slower. He stood by the foot of the bed, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, his eyebrows knitted together in a frown that looked too serious for his small face. I waved him over and he climbed up carefully, sitting by my legs. Mrs. Higgins stood by the door, her hands clasped respectfully. She told me they had eaten dinner and finished their homework. She said they were angels, but I could tell by the shadows under her eyes that it had been a long night. I thanked her profusely, my voice trembling slightly. I told her I would transfer the payment immediately plus a bonus. She waved me off, saying we could discuss business later and that she would wait in the cafeteria to give us some privacy. As the door clicked shut behind her, the room felt smaller and more intimate. Leo looked at me, his fingers twisting the tail of his dinosaur. He took a deep breath the way he always did before asking a big question. "Mommy, why did Grandma not come? She promised she would pick us up." We waited by the big blue gate for a long time. "Ms. Jenny said you called a special nanny, but Grandma said she was coming. Did we do something bad?" The question hit me harder than the surgeon's scalpel. It sliced through every defense I had built up over the last few hours. I looked at my son, deeply hurt by the rejection of the one person who was supposed to adore him. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to scream that his grandmother chose a concert over him. I wanted to tell him that she was selfish and cruel and that he deserved better. But I looked at his innocent face, and I knew I could not shatter his world just yet. I had to absorb the pain so he did not have to. I forced a smile onto my face, ignoring the pull of my stitches. "Oh, sweetie, no. You did nothing wrong. You and Maya are the best children in the whole world. Grandma is just very busy. She had to go on a sudden work trip. It was a big emergency for her job and she felt terrible that she could not come. She loves you both so much, but sometimes adults have to do boring work things." Maya lifted her head. "Is she working with Taylor Swift?" I saw Auntie Chloe post a picture on her phone. I froze. Of course. Even my 4-year-olds were not immune to the digital footprint of my family's betrayal. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes, baby. She is working at the concert. It is a very big job." Leo seemed to accept this. He nodded slowly, the tension leaving his small shoulders. "Okay. I just thought she forgot us." "She would never forget you," I lied. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I was protecting their image of her, but in doing so I was gaslighting myself. I was perpetuating the myth that we were a normal, loving family. But as I held my children, feeling their warmth and their unconditional love, I realized that I was the only one holding this myth together. Mrs. Higgins took them home an hour later, promising to bring them back the next day. The room felt colder once they left. I lay in the darkness, listening to the hospital sounds and waiting. I waited for 2 whole days. I waited through the post-operative checks. I waited through the transition to solid foods. I waited while the nurses looked at me with pity because my room was the only one without flowers or balloons. Finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, my phone rang. The screen flashed, "Mom." My pulse spiked, not with excitement, but with a sickening dread. I took a deep breath and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Sophia, are you home yet?" Her voice was loud and raspy, the distinct sound of someone who had spent the weekend screaming and drinking. "No, Mom, I am still in the hospital. I had surgery, remember." There was a huff of breath on the other end. "Well, you do not have to sound so hostile. We just got back. The traffic was a nightmare. I am exhausted. My feet are killing me from those heels. You have no idea how hard it is to stand for 4 hours." I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the tiles. "I am sorry your feet hurt, Mom. My abdomen was cut open, but I'm sorry about your feet." She missed the sarcasm completely. "Thank you. Anyway, we saw that you hired a nanny. That was a smart move, although I do not know why you did not just ask Tyler's mom. Paying a stranger is so wasteful." But that is your money, I guess. You promised Leo you would pick him up, I said, my voice quiet but steady. He asked why you did not come. He thought he did something wrong. Oh, for heaven's sake, Sophia, stop projecting. Kids are resilient. He probably forgot about it 5 minutes later. You always make everything so heavy. You know you really ruined the vibe of the trip. Every time my phone buzzed, I was afraid it was you calling with more drama. It made it really hard for me to fully enjoy the moment. Next time you decide to have a health crisis, maybe try to give us a little more notice so we do not have to feel guilty while we are trying to have fun. Next time. She said it as if my ruptured cyst was a scheduled appointment I had mishandled, as if my near-death experience was a deliberate attempt to sabotage her happiness. I am sorry I inconvenienced you, Mom, I said. And I meant it. I was sorry I had ever relied on her. I was sorry I had given her the power to hurt me. Yeah, well, just make sure you rest up. Oh, and Tyler wanted me to remind you that the tuition for his MBA program is due on Friday. Do not forget to transfer it. We are a little tapped out after the trip. Concert merchandise is insanely expensive. I gripped the phone so hard my hand shook. You want me to transfer the tuition money? Yes. And maybe send a little extra for groceries. The fridge is empty and I am too tired to cook. We were thinking of ordering takeout. I looked over at the empty chair where Leo had sat. I remembered his sad eyes asking if he had been bad. I thought about the lie I had to tell him to cover for her selfishness. And then I thought about the thousands of dollars I had poured into this black hole of a family. Okay, Mom, I said. My voice was eerily calm. I will take care of everything. Good. Talk to you later. Love you. The line went dead. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not ask when I would be discharged. She asked for money. I set the phone down on the bedside table. The silence returned, but this time it was not heavy. It was clarifying. I looked at the picture of the twins I kept on my nightstand. They were smiling, their arms around each other, oblivious to the toxicity that surrounded them. I had spent my whole life trying to buy my family's love, hoping that if I gave enough, paid enough, and sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. But they did not see me. They only saw a resource. And by enabling them, I was teaching my children that love was transactional. I was teaching Leo and Maya that it was okay to be treated like an option rather than a priority, no more. The words were a whisper, but they carried the weight of a judge's gavel. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in days I did not cry. I felt a cold resolve settle over me like a suit of armor. I would transfer the money all right. I would transfer every single cent out of the joint accounts. I would transfer the titles of the cars. I would transfer the ownership of the house. I looked at my children's photo one last time. This is for you, I promised them. Grandma broke her promise to you, but I will never break mine. I am going to cut the rot out of our lives, even if it means we stand alone. This was the last time they would ever make my son cry. The surgery removed the physical cyst, but the real operation was just beginning. And unlike the doctors, I would not be using anesthesia. I wanted them to feel everything. The ride home from the hospital was quiet. I sat in the back of the hired town car, watching the city skyline fade into the rearview mirror. My abdomen throbbed with every bump in the road, but for the first time in years, my mind was clear. When the car pulled up to the gates of my community, the security guard waved me through with a smile. I rolled down the window and asked him to stop. His name was Marcus, and he had worked the gate for 3 years. I handed him a list of 4 names: my mother, my father, my sister Chloe, and my brother-in-law Tyler. I told him that under no circumstances were these individuals allowed past the gate. I told him that if they tried to enter, he was to call the police immediately, not me. Marcus looked at the list and then at my pale face. He nodded solemnly and said, "Consider it done, Ms. Williams." Walking into my empty house felt different this time. It usually felt lonely, but today it felt like a fortress. The first thing I did after settling into the recliner in the living room was open the smart home app on my phone. For the last 5 years, the code to my front door had been my mother's birthday. It was a symbol of how open my life was to them. They could come and go as they pleased, raiding my fridge, using my pool, and taking my wine. I tapped the screen and deleted the user profiles. I changed the master code to the date my twins were born. The electronic lock on the front door chirped a confirmation sound. It was the sound of a bridge burning. I spent the next 2 days in a bubble of silence. Mrs. Higgins brought the twins home in the evenings, and we ate dinner on the floor of the living room watching cartoons. I turned off my phone notifications and focused on healing, but the world outside was getting impatient. The first crack in the silence came on Wednesday morning. I was sipping herbal tea when my phone lit up with a text from Chloe. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit there on the lock screen. The preview read, "Hey sis, hope you are feeling better. By the way, Henry's private school tuition is due tomorrow. The bursar just emailed me a reminder. Can you transfer the $3,000 today so I do not get a late fee? Thanks, love you." I stared at the message. There was no apology. No question about my surgery or recovery. Just a demand for money wrapped in a casual greeting. She assumed the Bank of Sofia was open for business as usual. She assumed that my silence over the last few days was just me sulking, and that I would eventually cave because I always did. I loved my nephew Henry. He was an innocent child caught in the crossfire of his parents' incompetence. But I knew that if I paid this tuition, I would be enabling them for another month. I opened the message so she would see the read receipt. I watched the 3 little dots appear as she started typing again, probably expecting a confirmation. I did not type back. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen to pour another cup of tea. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Tyler. Of course it was Tyler. When Chloe couldn't manipulate me, she sent her husband to intimidate me. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. He called again immediately, and again. On the 4th attempt, I answered, but I did not say hello. I just listened. "Sophia, what is your problem?" Tyler's voice boomed through the speaker. He sounded out of breath like he was pacing. "Chloe is crying because you are ignoring her. Do you know how stressful it is for her to worry about Henry's school on top of everything else? You are being incredibly immature." I took a slow sip of tea. "I am recovering from surgery, Tyler," I said calmly. "Yeah, well, we all have problems," he snapped. "Look, I know you are mad about the concert thing. But you need to grow up. You are punishing a child because you are jealous of our happiness. Family helps family. That is how it works. You have the money sitting there. Why are you making us beg? It is pathetic." He called me pathetic. The man who was driving a truck I paid for, living in a house I owned, and wearing a watch I bought for his birthday was calling me pathetic. "I am not making you beg, Tyler," I said, my voice ice cold. "I am making you responsible." I hung up before he could respond. Then I went to his contact info and scrolled down to the bottom. I pressed block caller. I did the same for Chloe. I did the same for my parents. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was mine. I opened my laptop and clicked on the Zoom link I had set up earlier. A minute later, the face of Robert Henderson, my estate attorney, appeared on the screen. Robert was a shark in a suit, a man who charged $600 an hour and was worth every penny. He looked at me with concern, noting my pale complexion, but he was professional enough to get straight to business. "Good morning, Sophia," he said. "I received your email. You want to review the asset structures." "I want to review everything, Robert," I said. "I want to know exactly what is in my name and what access they have." Robert pulled up a spreadsheet on the shared screen. It was a long list: the house my parents lived in, the cars, the joint credit cards, the college funds, the insurance policies. "Let us start with the house on Elm Street," Robert said. "The deed is in your name solely. Your parents are listed as tenants at will. There is no formal lease agreement." "Which means I can evict them?" I asked. Robert paused. "Legally, yes. But given they are your parents and have lived there for 10 years, it could be messy. Usually we would give a 30-day notice to vacate." "Draft it," I said without hesitation. Robert raised an eyebrow but typed a note. Okay, next are the credit cards. You have 3 platinum accounts with 4 authorized users: your mother, your father, your sister, and your brother-in-law. The current outstanding balance across all cards is $42,000. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. 42,000. That was mostly from the last month. The concert tickets, the hotel, the shopping spree. Cancel them, I said. Close the accounts entirely. I will pay off the balance to preserve my credit score, but I want the cards deactivated today. Done, Robert said. Now about the trust fund for your nephew Henry. You are the sole trustee. Freeze it, I said. I will not have my money used to buy designer clothes for Chloe while she claims it is for Henry. I will set up a direct payment to the school if and when I decide to, but for now, cut off the access. We went down the list item by item. Every click of Robert's mouse was a severance of a cord that had been strangling me for years. We stripped away the supplementary cards. We revoked the power of attorney I had given my father in case of emergency. We removed them as beneficiaries on my life insurance policy and replaced them with a trust for Leo and Maya. By the end of the hour, I was exhausted, but I felt lighter. I had just dismantled the financial ecosystem that sustained my family's lifestyle. I knew the fallout would be nuclear. I knew that when those cards got declined and when that eviction notice arrived, they would come for me with pitchforks. But looking at the empty Zoom screen after Robert signed off, I realized something important. They could not hurt me anymore. They had already done the worst thing possible by abandoning me. Everything that happened next was just consequences. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. A delivery truck was pulling up to the neighbor's house. Life was going on. I picked up my phone and saw a notification from the bank app. Credit card ending in 4589 reported lost or stolen. Account closed. It was done. The first domino had fallen. Now I just had to sit back and wait for the crash. The first notification arrived at exactly 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my home office reviewing quarterly reports for a client, but my eyes kept drifting to the second monitor where I had my personal banking dashboard open. It was a strange feeling waiting for a disaster you had personally engineered. It felt like watching a storm front roll in, knowing you were the one who summoned the clouds. The notification was a simple red banner that popped up on the screen. Transaction declined. Merchant Serenity Day Spa. Amount $560. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow sip of coffee. I knew exactly where my mother was. Every Tuesday she went to Serenity with her group of friends, whom she called the Golden Ladies. They were a circle of retired or semi-retired women who spent their afternoons gossiping about their children and comparing handbags. For years my mother had been the queen bee of this group, not because she had her own wealth, but because she had access to mine. She would treat them to treatments, or buy the round of mimosas afterward, always waving my platinum card with a casual air of abundance. Today, she had gone in for the deluxe package: a hot stone massage, a facial, and a pedicure. She had likely spent the last 3 hours bragging about the VIP concert experience and how her successful daughter was taking care of everything. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. I could almost smell the lavender and eucalyptus of the spa lobby. My mother would be standing at the marble front desk, glowing from the expensive creams they had just slathered on her face. Her friends, Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Davis, would be standing behind her, chatting happily. The receptionist, a young girl named Sarah, who knew my mother by name, would present the bill on a small silver tray. My mother would not even look at the total. She would just reach into her designer purse, the one I bought her for Christmas, and pull out the heavy metal card. She would hand it over with a smile that said, "I am important." Sarah would slide the card into the chip reader. They would wait in silence for a moment. Then the machine would beep. Not the happy chirp of approval, but the low buzzing drone of rejection. I imagined my mother's laugh. A nervous little titter. "Oh, these machines are so sensitive," she would say. "Try it again, dear. Maybe the chip is dirty." She would rub the card on her silk blouse and hand it back. Sarah would try again. Processing, processing. Declined. The silence in the lobby would be deafening. Mrs. Jenkins would stop talking. Mrs. Davis would look at her shoes. The illusion of the wealthy matriarch would begin to crack right there under the soft ambient lighting. My phone started buzzing on the desk. Mom. I watched it vibrate. She called once. She called twice. She called 3 times in rapid succession. She was panicking. She was not worried about the money, she was worried about her image. She was standing there with $500 worth of services on her skin and no way to pay for them. I let it go to voicemail. I could imagine the desperation in her voice as she realized she had to turn around and face her friends. The queen bee had lost her sting. She would have to do the unthinkable. She would have to ask Mrs. Jenkins to cover her bill. I knew how much that would burn. Mrs. Jenkins had a son who was a mechanic, and my mother always looked down on her. Now she had to beg her for a loan. It was a humiliation that would last far longer than the facial. 30 minutes later, the second domino fell. This time the notification came from a gas station on the other side of town. Transaction declined. Merchant Shell Station. Amount $95. Tyler. My brother-in-law drove a Ford F-150 Rapture. It was a massive lifted truck that he insisted he needed for his work, although his work mostly consisted of driving to golf courses and coffee shops. The truck was a gas guzzler, and he filled it up twice a week, always using the fleet fuel card I had set up for him years ago when he claimed he was starting a contracting business. That business never materialized, but the fuel bills did. I checked the security alert detail. The pump had authorized the card initially, but when the system did a final check against the account status, it cut the fuel flow. I could see him clearly. He would be standing there in his aviator sunglasses watching the numbers on the pump tick up. Suddenly the nozzle would click off. He would squeeze the handle again. Nothing. He would look at the screen, which would be flashing a message. See cashier. Authorization failed. Tyler was a man with a short fuse and a lot of entitlement. He would storm into the station store, pushing past people in line. He would slam the card on the counter and demand the clerk turn the pump back on. The clerk, probably a teenager making minimum wage, would tell him the card was invalid. Tyler would argue. He would say, "Do you know who I am?" He would say, "There is plenty of money on that card, my sister-in-law is rich." He would try to swipe it again and again, each failure chipping away at his fragile ego. Then the anger would hit. Tyler was a physical man when he was frustrated. I checked the time. It was 3:15. My phone rang again. Unknown number. He was calling from the gas station landline or maybe his own cell, which I had already blocked. I did not answer. I could picture him walking back out to his truck, the big powerful vehicle that was now just a 2-ton paperweight without gas. He would be red in the face. He would look around to see if anyone was watching. And then he would lash out. He would kick the tire, a hard, violent kick that would hurt his foot more than the rubber. He would scream a curse word into the air. He was stranded. He had no cash because he never carried cash. He had no other credit cards because his credit score was ruined years ago. He was a man playing pretend, and I had just turned on the lights. By 4 o'clock, the group texts started rolling in. I had muted the conversation, but I could still see the previews. From Mom, Sophia, pick up the phone. The bank is making a mistake. My card isn't working and I had to borrow money from Linda. It was so embarrassing. Call the bank immediately and fix this. From Tyler. Hey, your stupid gas card is broken. I am stuck at the Shell on Main. Send me some cash via Zelle right now so I can leave. This is ridiculous. You need to fire your accountant. From Chloe. Why is everyone's card acting up? I tried to order lunch and it said invalid payment method. Sophia, are you there? This is not funny. They were in chaos. But the most interesting thing was their reaction. Not a single one of them thought for a second that I had done this on purpose. Their narcissism was a shield. In their minds, I existed to serve them. The idea that the servant would lock the master out of the house was inconceivable. They thought it was a glitch, A technical error, a bank mix-up. They thought I was sitting at home frantically trying to fix it for them. They had no idea that I was sitting here drinking coffee and smiling. They thought this was a temporary inconvenience. They did not know it was an eviction notice for their entire lifestyle. I opened the folder on my computer labeled Phase 2. The decline of the credit cards was just the opening shot. It was the warning siren. Tonight, when they all gathered at my parents' house to complain about their bad luck and blame the banking system, the real blow would land. I had scheduled an email to be sent to my father at 6 p.m. It was a notification from the power company. The auto pay for the electricity at their house had been canceled. And there was an overdue balance I had allowed to accumulate over the last month while I was in the hospital. I watched the sun begin to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across my lawn. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer the daughter who couldn't do enough. I was the stranger who did nothing. And watching them flail in the shallow water of their own incompetence was the most satisfying thing I had ever witnessed. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from my mother. I decided to listen to this one. Sophia, I do not know what is going on, but you need to handle it. Linda is expecting me to pay her back by tomorrow. Do not make me look like a fool. Call me back. I pressed delete. I did not need to handle anything. I was done handling things. I stood up and walked to the window. Let them panic. Let them think it is a mistake. The realization that they were on their own would hit them soon enough, and when it did, it would hit harder, because they never saw it coming. The Bank of Sofia was not having technical difficulties. The Bank of Sofia had been permanently liquidated, and I was the only shareholder walking away with the assets. I went to the kitchen to start dinner for the twins. We were having spaghetti, their favorite. It was going to be a quiet, lovely evening. Miles away, my family was beginning to starve, and for the first time, I did not feel the urge to feed them. Thursday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The air in my house was still, and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds. I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop open, enjoying the freedom of a quiet inbox. My phone, which had been a source of constant anxiety for years, was now blissfully silent thanks to the blocking features I had engaged. But as any seasoned executive knows, silence often precedes a strategic strike. When a narcissist cannot reach you through the front door, they will try the window, and when the window is locked, they will try the chimney. At 9:30 in the morning, a notification pinged on my laptop. It was an email marked high priority. The sender was Tyler. Since I had blocked his number and his social media accounts, email was the only avenue he had left. The subject line read, "Regarding your behavior and family stability." I almost laughed out loud. The man who had not paid a bill in his adult life was lecturing me on stability. I took a sip of my coffee and clicked open the message. It was not a note. It was a manifesto. 3 single-spaced pages of unadulterated entitlement. I began to read, and with every sentence my amusement shifted into a cold, sharp anger. Tyler did not write like a man who was sorry. He wrote like a king addressing a rebellious subject. "Sophia," he began, "I am writing this because you are clearly in an emotional state that prevents rational conversation. I understand that surgery is difficult, and that being a single woman at your age brings a certain level of bitterness and loneliness. However, you are letting your personal unhappiness destroy the fabric of this family." I paused. The audacity was breathtaking. He was framing my boundaries as symptoms of bitterness. He was playing the card that society always throws at successful women. If we are firm, we are bitter. If we are wealthy but unmarried, we must be miserable. I continued reading. He went on to describe the stress I was causing him. "As the man of the house," he wrote, "I carry the burden of leading this family. I have to ensure that Chloe is happy and that your parents are taken care of. You do not understand the pressure of being a provider, Sophia. You write checks, but you do not carry the emotional weight of leadership. When you cut off the funds, you undermined my authority as the head of the household." The head of the household. I looked around my kitchen, which I paid for. I thought about the house he was living in, which I paid for. I thought about the food in his stomach, which I paid for. Tyler was the head of the household in the same way a tick is the head of a dog. He was a parasite convinced he was steering the host. He continued his lecture, moving into what he called the solution. I am willing to overlook this tantrum, he wrote. I know you crave connection, and we are willing to give that to you. But you need to understand your role. You have money, but you do not have a life. We have a life. We have love. We have joy. If you want to be part of that, you need to apologize to your mother for humiliating her at the spa. You need to apologize to me for the gas station incident. You need to reactivate the cards immediately. If you do this by noon today, I will convince your parents to forgive you. We can go back to normal. Do not throw away the only people who tolerate you. Tolerate me. The word hung in the air. For a decade, I had funded their vacations, their cars, their homes, and their wardrobes. And in their eyes, they were tolerating me. They viewed my generosity not as a gift, but as a tax I had to pay for the privilege of their company. Tyler honestly believed that he was the prize and I was the lucky spectator. He ended the email with a final veiled threat. If you do not fix this, I will have to take steps to protect my family from your toxic influence. We will cut you off completely, and you will die alone in that big, empty house. Think about it, Sophia. Money cannot hug you at night. I sat back in my chair. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. I felt a supreme sense of clarity. Tyler had made a fatal error. He assumed that because I was a woman and because I was black, and because I loved my family, I would be susceptible to his patriarchal bullying. He thought he could mansplain my own life to me. He thought he could use my singleness as a weapon. He forgot that I negotiated million-dollar contracts with men far more powerful and intimidating than him every single day. I looked at the clock. It was 10:15. He wanted an answer by noon. I would give him an answer, but it would not be the one he expected. I hit reply, but I did not type a message to Tyler. Instead, I clicked forward. I typed in the email address of the repossession department at the bank, where I held the lease on the Ford F-150 Raptor. The truck that Tyler drove, the truck that he called his beast, the truck that was the physical manifestation of his fragile masculinity. For years I had let him drive it. The lease was in my name because his credit score was in the double digits. I paid the monthly note. I paid the insurance. He just drove it and posted pictures of it on Instagram with captions about grinding and hustling. I typed a quick message to the asset management team, to whom it may concern. I am the leaseholder for the Ford Raptor with license plate TYLER1. I am voluntarily surrendering this vehicle effective immediately. The current driver is unauthorized and has refused to return the keys. The vehicle is located at the following address. Please expedite the recovery. I authorize you to enter the driveway to retrieve the asset. I attached a copy of the lease agreement proving I was the sole owner. Then I forwarded the email to my personal attorney Robert with a note. Robert, please draft a formal response to Tyler. Do not address his personal insults. Simply inform him that the vehicle he is driving is being surrendered and that any attempt to hide it or damage it will result in criminal charges for grand theft auto. Also, please inform him that his residency at my property is currently under review and any further harassment via email will be added to the file for the restraining order. I hit send. I imagined Tyler sitting in my parents' living room right now, checking his phone, waiting for my apology. He was probably telling Chloe that he had handled it. He was probably puffing his chest out, telling my father that women just need a firm hand. He had no idea that a flatbed tow truck was currently being dispatched to his location. He wanted to talk about the burden of being a provider. Well, today he was going to learn what happens when the real provider goes on strike. He loved that truck more than he loved his wife. It was his identity. It was how he projected power to the world. Without it, he was just a man in a borrowed house with no job and no ride. I closed my laptop and stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at my own driveway where my luxury sedan sat paid for and secure. Tyler was right about one thing. Money cannot hug you at night, but money can buy you safety, money can buy you peace, and money can buy the services of a very efficient tow truck driver. I decided I would go for a swim in my pool. The water would be cool and refreshing. I would float on my back and look at the sky, and while I was floating, Tyler would be hearing the beep 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 of a truck backing into his driveway. He would run out screaming. He would try to use his white male privilege to intimidate the driver. He would shout about his rights. But the driver would just look at the paperwork with my signature on it and hook up the chains. Tyler wanted to be the man of the house. Today, he was going to be the man on the sidewalk watching his ego being towed away to the impound lot. And the best part was, I didn't even have to say a word to him. My silence was not surrender. My silence was the sound of the gavel coming down. By Friday afternoon, the atmosphere in my parents' house had shifted from panic to a terrifying kind of calculated desperation. I knew something was wrong when I received a notification from the director of the Golden Oaks Assisted Living Facility. He informed me that my parents had checked my grandfather Elijah out for the weekend, claiming it was for a special family celebration. I had paid the deposit for the facility, and I was the primary contact, but legally my father still held partial guardianship, which allowed him to take Grandpa out for short periods. I knew immediately that this was not a celebration. This was a hostage situation. I drove over to the house on Elm Street, the house that was technically mine, but felt like enemy territory. My stomach churned not with fear, but with a fierce protective instinct. My grandfather Elijah was 85 years old. He was a man who had built a construction empire from nothing, a man who had marched for civil rights, and a man who had taught me everything I knew about dignity and business. But in recent years, he had grown quiet. He used a wheelchair and his hands shook with a tremor that made holding a coffee cup difficult. My family dismissed him as senile. They treated him like a piece of old furniture that occasionally needed dusting. They spoke about him while he was in the room as if he were invisible. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the medical transport van pulling away. I had paid for that transport service on a standing auto pay, but I knew my mother would be inside right now claiming she had arranged it all. I walked to the front door and keyed in the code. It still worked because the eviction notice was not effective for another 24 hours. I stepped into the living room and the scene that greeted me made my blood boil. Grandpa Elijah was seated in his wheelchair in the center of the room. He looked small in his oversized cardigan, his head bowed low, his chin resting on his chest. He looked frail and confused. Surrounding him were the vultures. My mother Brenda was kneeling on one side of him, holding his hand with a tightness that looked painful. My father Marcus was pacing behind him, nervously checking the window. And there was Tyler, sitting on the coffee table, right in front of Grandpa, holding a thick stack of legal documents and a pen. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" my mother snapped as soon as she saw me. "We are having a private family moment with Grandpa. You are not wanted here." I ignored her and walked straight to my grandfather. "Hi, Grandpa," I said softly, crouching down to his eye level. "I just wanted to make sure you are okay." He did not look up. His eyes seemed unfocused, staring at a spot on the carpet. He let out a low grumble, and his hand twitched. "See," Tyler said with a sneer. "He does not even know who you are. He is terrified of you, Sophia. We told him what you did. We told him how you cut off the family and threatened to kick his son out on the street." I looked at Tyler. "You told him I am kicking them out. Did you mention that I bought this house to save them from foreclosure 10 years ago?" Tyler waved his hand dismissively. "Details do not matter to a man with dementia. All he knows is that his granddaughter has lost her mind. That is why we are here. To fix things. To protect him and the family assets from your instability." I stood up and crossed my arms. "What assets, Tyler? Grandpa retired 15 years ago." Tyler smirked, the arrogant confidence of a man who thinks he has found a loophole. "The trust fund, Sophia. We know about the family trust. Dad told me that Elijah never actually signed over the final control of the primary estate. He just let you manage it. But if he signs this new power of attorney today, I become the executor. I can override your decisions. I can unfreeze the accounts. I can kick you out of the decision-making process entirely. I looked at the papers in his hand. They were standard legal forms, probably downloaded from the internet. They were messy and desperate. They were trying to trick an 85-year-old man into signing away control of an empire they did not understand. Grandpa? My father whispered, leaning down into the old man's ear. Dad, listen to me. Sophia is sick. She is having a breakdown. She is stealing your money, Dad. She is going to put you in a state home. You have to sign this so Tyler and I can protect you. We will take care of you. Just make your mark on the line. My mother joined in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Do it for the family, Daddy. Do it so we can keep the house. Sophia is dangerous right now. We love you so much. Just sign the paper. I watched Grandpa. He looked so helpless. His head bobbed up and down, slowly mimicking the nod of a compliant child. His mouth hung open slightly. To anyone else, he looked like a man whose mind had completely vacated the premises. Tyler uncapped the pen and forced it into Grandpa's trembling hand. He guided the hand toward the signature line. Right here, Pops Tyler said loudly, as if Grandpa was deaf. Just an X is fine. We have witnesses. Chloe is recording it. I looked over and saw Chloe in the corner holding her phone up, filming the entire thing. They were building their case. They wanted proof that Elijah freely signed over his rights to save his family from his evil granddaughter. I felt a surge of panic. If he signed that, it would cause a legal nightmare. Even if I could prove later that he was incompetent, it would tie up the assets in court for months. It would stop the eviction. It would give them the lifeline they desperately needed. Stop, I said, stepping forward. He does not know what he is signing. This is elder abuse. Shut up, Sophia, Tyler barked. He knows exactly what he is doing. He is choosing us. He is choosing family over money. I looked at Grandpa again. He was holding the pen, hovering over the paper. His hand was shaking violently. My father was practically drooling with anticipation. My mother was holding her breath. Then suddenly Grandpa stopped shaking. For a split second his hand became rock steady. He lifted his head just an inch. He did not look at Tyler. He did not look at my parents. He looked past Tyler's shoulder directly at me. And then he winked. It was not a twitch. It was not a spasm. It was a deliberate, sharp, slow wink of his left eye. A signal. A memory flashed through my mind. I was 7 years old, sitting in Grandpa's office while he negotiated a deal with a difficult contractor. The contractor was shouting, trying to intimidate him. Grandpa had looked at me and winked, just before he calmly destroyed the man's arguments with a single clause in the contract. The wink meant play along. The wink meant I am 5 steps ahead of them. The wink meant the lion is just pretending to be asleep. I felt a rush of relief so intense it nearly made my knees buckle. He was not senile. He was not confused. He was putting on the performance of a lifetime. I masked my expression instantly. I stepped back and let out a defeated sigh. Fine, I said, my voice trembling with fake resignation. If that is what he wants? If he trusts you, Tyler, then let him sign. Tyler beamed, looking at Chloe's camera with triumph. See, she admits it. Go ahead, Pops, sign it. Grandpa let out a long, groaning sound. He moved the pen toward the paper. He pressed the tip down. My parents leaned in, their eyes wide with greed. But instead of signing his name, Grandpa suddenly jerked his hand. The pen skidded across the paper, tearing through the page and drawing a long, jagged line off the edge and onto Tyler's expensive beige trousers. Oops, Tyler yelled, jumping back as the ink stained his pants. Grandpa dropped the pen. He let his head fall back onto his chest and started muttering nonsense words. Bibble, babble, blue. No soup today. No soup. My mother looked horrified. Oh God, he ruined the form. He is useless, Tyler hissed, wiping at his pants. He is completely gone. He cannot even hold a pen. Give me another copy, my father demanded. We will guide his hand this time. Hand over hand. It is legal if we help him. They scrambled to find another document. They were so focused on the ink and the paper and their own frustration that they did not see what I saw. I saw the corner of Grandpa's mouth twitch upward into a microscopic smile. He was stalling. He was playing them. He knew exactly who was in the room, and he knew exactly what they wanted. I checked my watch. It was 4:45. The courts closed at 5. Even if they got a signature now, they could not file it until Monday. And the eviction notice took effect at midnight tonight. Grandpa had just bought me the weekend. I looked at the chaotic scene before me. My family frantically trying to force a pen into the hand of a man who was smarter than all of them combined. They thought they were manipulating a victim. They had no idea they were sitting at the table with the grandmaster of the game. I will leave you to it, I said, turning to the door. I cannot watch this. Good riddance, my mother shouted without looking up. I walked out of the house and into the fresh air. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, laughing quietly. A tear rolled down my cheek, but it was a tear of gratitude. I was not alone. I had never been alone. The patriarch of the family was awake, and he had just chosen his side. The war was on, and I had the ultimate secret weapon sitting in a wheelchair wearing a cardigan. The weekend passed in a blur of manic energy for my family. After the incident with the pen and the ruined trousers, they had retreated to regroup. A rational family might have seen my grandfather's erratic behavior as a sign to stop pushing him. A loving family would have been concerned about his health. But my family was neither rational nor loving. They were addicts, and their drug of choice was other people's money. To them, the ink stain on Tyler's pants was just a minor setback in a war they were convinced they were winning. They believed Grandpa was senile and pliable. They believed I was mentally unstable and isolated. And most dangerously, they believed that by Monday morning they would be the new kings and queens of the Williams estate. I spent Saturday and Sunday in the quiet sanctuary of my home, monitoring their descent into madness from afar. It was fascinating to watch. It was like observing a group of people buying champagne on a credit card that had already been canceled. Tyler was the first to show his hand. On Saturday afternoon, my phone alerted me to a series of inquiries on my professional LinkedIn profile. Tyler had updated his own profile. Under current employment, he had listed himself as Chief Executive Officer of Williams Holdings. There was no such company. It was a phantom entity he had invented in his mind to house the assets he thought he was about to steal. Later that day, I received a call from an old acquaintance who was a member at the prestigious country club where Tyler had been trying to get a membership for years. My friend told me that Tyler was at the clubhouse buying rounds of drinks for strangers. He was loud and boasting to anyone who would listen. He was telling people that he was taking over his wife's family business because the current leadership was incompetent. He told a table of real estate developers that he would soon be listing prime commercial land for development. He was referring to the land my grandfather had bought 50 years ago, the land Grandpa intended to turn into a community park. Tyler was selling off my grandfather's legacy before the ink was even dry on the forgery he planned to commit. I thanked my friend for the information and hung up. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. Tyler was digging a grave so deep he would never be able to climb out of it. He was destroying his reputation in real time, promising deals he could not deliver, and spending money he did not have. Then there was Chloe. If Tyler was greedy, Chloe was delusional. On Sunday morning, my social media feed updated with a new post from her. She had checked in at a luxury open house in the most exclusive neighborhood in Buckhead. It was a sprawling estate with 6 bedrooms, a theater, and a wine cellar. The asking price was $2.5 million. I watched her stories. She was walking through the master bedroom, running her hand over the imported silk wallpaper. She narrated the video with a breathless excitement. "This closet is perfect for my new wardrobe," she said to the camera. "I think we are going to put an offer in tomorrow, manifesting big things for my family." She was treating the realtor like a servant, pointing out imaginary flaws in the marble flooring to sound knowledgeable. She talked about knocking down walls and redoing the landscaping. She was mentally moving into a mansion while her husband was driving a truck that was currently sitting in an impound lot. They were living in a fantasy world constructed entirely of entitlement and lies. But the centerpiece of their delusion was the document itself. On Sunday night, I received a forwarded email from my lawyer, Robert. He had a contact at the local legal stationery store where Tyler had gone to print a document. Tyler, being Tyler, had not even been smart enough to do it privately. He had used the public computer and left a digital copy on the desktop. Robert attached the file for me to read. It was a new power of attorney form. It was a masterpiece of malice. It revoked all previous powers of attorney, which meant it stripped me of my authority. It appointed Tyler and Chloe as co-guardians of Elijah Williams. It gave them full, unrestricted access to all banking accounts, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios. And in a final stroke of cruelty, they added a clause that explicitly stated, Sophia Williams is to be excluded from all financial decisions due to conflicts of interest and emotional instability. They had written me out of my own family. They had codified their hatred into legal language. They were not just trying to take the money. They were trying to erase me. I sat in my office reading the document over and over. A younger version of me would have been hurt. I would have called them screaming. I would have tried to reason with them. But I was not that person anymore. I was the CEO of my own life, and I knew that in business you never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. I called Robert. Let them do it, I said into the phone. Robert hesitated. Sophia, are you sure? If they get Elijah to sign this, it will be a headache to unravel. We will have to prove fraud. I am sure, I said. I want them to walk into that room on Monday feeling invincible. I want them to present that paper. I want them to think they have won. Because the higher they climb, the harder they fall. And I want them to fall from the greatest height possible. I looked at the calendar. Monday was the deadline for the eviction notice I had sent for the house they were living in. Monday was also the day they planned to force Grandpa to sign this document. It was going to be a collision of two realities, their delusion versus my documentation. I spent the rest of Sunday preparing. I printed out the real trust documents, the ones Grandpa had signed 5 years ago, with a sound mind and legal witnesses. The documents that proved he had already transferred the bulk of his estate into an irrevocable trust managed by me. The documents that proved that even if he signed 100 napkins for Tyler, it would not matter, because Grandpa did not legally own the assets anymore. The trust did. And I was the trustee. They were fighting for keys to a safe that had been empty for years. I went to bed early that night, but I did not sleep much. I lay awake listening to the wind and thinking about my grandfather. I hoped he was resting. I hoped he was enjoying his secret game. I pictured him in that house surrounded by vultures pretending to be confused while sharpening his knife. He was a Trojan horse in a cardigan. Tomorrow was the day. The invitation for the so-called family meeting had arrived in my email inbox earlier that day. It was sent by Tyler. The subject line was Family Resolution. The body of the email was short and condescending. Come to the house at 6 p.m. We are settling this once and for all. Grandpa is ready to make the right choice. Do not be late. I would not be late. I would be right on time. And I would bring something far more powerful than a power of attorney. I would bring the truth. And when the dust settled, I would be the only one left standing. The stage was set. The actors were in place. And the script they had written for themselves was about to end in a tragedy they never saw coming. The email arrived in my inbox at 9 in the morning on Monday. The subject line read, Family Unity Dinner, and the preview text was so dripping with condescension I could almost wipe it off my screen. It was sent by my mother, but the wording had Tyler written all over it. The message stated that the family was willing to offer me a path to redemption. It said that despite my erratic behavior and the emotional distress I had caused, they were gracious enough to host a dinner in my honor. The goal was to heal the family rift and finalized the legal arrangements for Grandpa Elijah's care. The final line was the kicker. It read, "Come to dinner, Sophia. Bring your apology, and we will bring our forgiveness. We know you will do the right thing if you know what is good for you." I stared at the screen and felt a cold smile spread across my face. They were not inviting me to a dinner. They were summoning me to a trial where they served as judge, jury, and executioner. They had invited the extended family, my aunts, my uncles, and the cousins who always borrowed money. They were bringing in an audience to shame me into submission. They believed that if they surrounded me with enough judgmental stares and whispered accusations, I would crumble. They thought that under the weight of peer pressure, I would sign whatever document they put in front of me just to make the discomfort stop. They had no idea that I was not coming to negotiate. I was coming to foreclose. I spent the afternoon preparing. Usually for a family gathering, I would wear something modest, something beige or gray to blend in and not draw attention to my success. I would try to make myself smaller so my sister Chloe would not feel threatened and my mother would not make snide comments about my weight or my career. But today was not a day for blending in. I walked into my walk-in closet and pushed past the sensible business suits. I reached for the garment bag at the very back. Inside was a dress I had bought in Milan 3 years ago and never worn. It was a blood-red silk sheath dress, tailored to perfection. It was bold. It was aggressive. It was the color of power and warning. I put it on and looked in the mirror. I did not see the scared little girl who just wanted her mother's approval anymore. I saw a woman who had survived a physical rupture and an emotional betrayal. I applied my makeup with precision, choosing a dark red lipstick to match the dress. Then I went to my safe. I took out the thick leather-bound folder containing the original trust documents, the bank statements showing years of financial support, and the printed screenshots of their social media posts from the concert. I also included the eviction notice, which was set to be served by the sheriff the next morning. I placed the folder in my briefcase. This was my weapon. I drove to the house on Elm Street as the sun was beginning to set. The driveway was already packed with cars. I recognized Uncle Ray's rusted sedan and Aunt Sarah's minivan. They had called in the cavalry just as I suspected. I parked my luxury sedan right behind Tyler's truck, blocking him in. It was a petty move, but it felt good. When I walked through the front door, the noise in the living room died down instantly. It was like walking into a saloon in an old Western movie right before the shootout. 20 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. My mother was holding a tray of appetizers. She froze when she saw the red dress. She looked me up and down, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Well," she said loudly, breaking the silence, "you certainly dressed up. We are just having a family potluck, Sophia, not a gala. But I suppose you always have to be the center of attention." I walked into the room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I did not apologize. I did not lower my head. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I thought this was a special occasion. We are settling the family business, are we not? Aunt Sarah stepped forward. She was a woman who lived for gossip and church bingo. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. "Sophia, honey, we have been praying for you. Your mother told us about your breakdown. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Stress can make people do crazy things like cutting off their own flesh and blood. Just say you are sorry so we can eat." I looked at Aunt Sarah. She was wearing a brooch I had bought her for her birthday 5 years ago. I wanted to ask her if my money was crazy when it paid for her cataract surgery, but I held my tongue. Not yet. I looked around the room for the only person who mattered. Grandpa Elijah was sitting in his wheelchair in the corner near the window. He was dressed in his Sunday best, a crisp suit that hung loosely on his frame. He had a blanket over his knees. His head was bowed and he appeared to be dozing off. No one was talking to him. No one was offering him a drink. He was just a prop in their stage play. I walked over to him and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "Hi, Grandpa," I whispered. He did not look up, but I felt a slight pressure as he leaned into my hand. It was enough. He was ready. Tyler emerged from the kitchen holding a bottle of wine. He was wearing a suit that was a little too tight, trying to look the part of the patriarch. He saw me and smirked. "Glad you could make it, Sophia. We were just telling everyone how excited we are to have you back on the team. Once we get the paperwork sorted tonight, we can put all this unpleasantness behind us." He gestured to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, my china actually. They had arranged the seating carefully. Tyler sat at the head of the table, the seat that Grandpa used to occupy. My father sat to his right, my mother to his left. They had placed a chair for me at the far end of the table near the kitchen door. It was the children's seat. It was a visual demotion. I walked to the chair and sat down, placing my heavy briefcase on the floor beside me. The rest of the family filed in, filling the room with the sounds of scraping chairs and nervous chatter. The air was thick with tension. They were all looking at me, waiting for the show to begin. They wanted tears, they wanted begging, they wanted the broken version of Sophia. My mother tapped her glass with a spoon. "Attention, everyone," she said, beaming a fake smile. "Before we eat, I just want to say how blessed we are to have the whole family together. We have had a difficult week. There have been some misunderstandings, some hurtful actions." She looked pointedly at me. "But we are a forgiving family. We are here to help Sophia make things right." She turned to Tyler. "Tyler, darling, why don't you lead us in grace?" Tyler stood up. He buttoned his jacket and looked around the room, puffing out his chest. He loved this. He loved the attention. He loved the idea that he, a man who had failed at every business venture he ever attempted, was now presiding over a family fortune. "Lord, we thank you for this food," Tyler began, his voice booming. "And we thank you for bringing Sophia back to us. We ask that you soften her heart. Help her to release her anger and her greed. Help her to understand that family is about sharing, not hoarding. We ask that you guide her hand as she signs the documents tonight, giving us the power to protect this family's legacy. Amen." "Amen," the family chorused. I kept my eyes open. I stared directly at Tyler. Amen indeed, I thought. Dinner was served. It was roast chicken and vegetables. My mother had made my favorite stuffing, a clear attempt at manipulation. "See, we cooked for you. See how much we love you." As we ate, the attacks began. It started subtly. Uncle Ray leaned over. "So, Sophia, I hear you tried to cancel your parents' credit cards. That is a dangerous game to play with the elderly. What if they had an emergency?" I cut a piece of chicken. "If they had an emergency, they could call 911, Uncle Ray. The credit cards were for luxury goods. I hardly think a lack of designer handbags constitutes a medical crisis." Chloe chimed in from across the table. She was picking at her food, looking at me with wide, innocent eyes. "It is not just the cards, Sophia. It is the principle. You have so much. You live in that big house all alone. Why are you so obsessed with controlling everything? Tyler just wants to help take the burden off you. You look tired. You look old. Maybe you should take a sabbatical and let the men handle the finances." The men. I looked at my father, who was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at Tyler, who was drinking his third glass of wine. I looked at Grandpa Elijah, who was slowly eating his mashed potatoes, his hand trembling just enough to sell the act. I wiped my mouth with the napkin and set it down on the table. It was time. "I am glad you brought that up, Chloe," I said, my voice cutting through the clatter of silverware. "I am tired. I am tired of carrying people who have two perfectly good legs but refuse to walk. I am tired of being the bank for a family that treats me like a teller." The room went silent. My mother gasped. "Sophia, do not start a scene. We have guests." "I am not starting a scene, Mother," I said, reaching down and lifting my briefcase onto the table. "I am finishing one. You invited me here to sign a document. You want me to sign over control of Grandpa's estate to Tyler. You want me to apologize for cutting off your funds. You want to humiliate me in front of the family so I will fall back in line." I opened the briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. "But there is something you need to know before we proceed." I continued, pulling out the thick stack of papers. "You are laboring under a delusion. You think you are sitting in a house you own. You think you are spending money that belongs to Grandpa. And you think that because I am a woman, and because I am your daughter, I will let you steal it. I stood up. The red dress caught the light. I felt 10 feet tall. Tyler stood up too, his face flushing red. Sit down, Sophia. You are embarrassing yourself. Just give me the papers. I looked at him. I looked at the aunts and uncles who were now watching with open mouths. And then I looked at Grandpa. Grandpa, I said softly, are you done with your potatoes? Grandpa Elijah stopped eating. He slowly placed his fork on the plate. He took a sip of water, and then he lifted his head. The vacancy in his eyes vanished. The tremor in his hands disappeared. He sat up straight, his spine aligning with the dignity of a king. He looked at Tyler with a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. I am done, Sophia, he said, his voice strong and clear, ringing out in the silent room. I think it is time for dessert. My mother dropped her fork. My father turned pale. Tyler looked like he had seen a ghost. I smiled. The trap was sprung. The dinner was over. The trial was about to begin. The air in the room was so thick with judgment I could almost taste it. It tasted like stale perfume and hypocrisy. After dinner, the family migrated from the dining table to the living room for what my mother called coffee and conversation, but what was actually the scheduled public shaming of Sophia Williams. I walked into the room, and 20 pairs of eyes followed my every movement. I was the defendant walking into a courtroom where the jury was made up of people who had borrowed money from me and never paid it back. I took a seat on the edge of the ottoman, keeping my distance from the main sofa where my parents held court. I could hear the whispers starting immediately. My Aunt Sarah was leaning in close to my cousin Beatrice, shielding her mouth with a napkin, but making no effort to lower her voice. It is a sin to be that greedy, Sarah hissed. I heard she has millions sitting in the bank, but she let her own mother's credit card get declined at a spa. Can you imagine the embarrassment? Brenda was mortified. Beatrice nodded vigorously, her eyes darting over to me. It is the influence of that corporate world. She has lost her soul. She thinks money makes her better than us. Look at that dress. It is red. Who wears red to a family reconciliation? She is mocking us. I kept my face impassive. I smoothed the silk of my dress and crossed my legs. They called me greedy. These were the same women whose children I had sent to summer camp. These were the same women whose Christmas gifts I had upgraded every year. In their eyes, generosity was not a gift, it was an obligation. And the moment I stopped the flow, I became a villain. My mother was circulating the room, playing the victim with the skill of an Academy Award-winning actress. She was dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting hugs and condolences. I just do not know where we went wrong, she wailed softly to Uncle Ray. We gave her everything. We loved her. And now she treats us like strangers. I am just glad Tyler is here to step up. He has been a rock, a real son. I watched Tyler. He was standing in the center of the room holding a glass of expensive cognac that came from my father's liquor cabinet, which I had stocked. He was basking in the adoration. To this room full of people who did not know the truth, he was the hero. He was the strong male figure stepping in to save the elderly parents from their unstable daughter. He caught my eye and smiled. It was a smile that made my skin crawl. He walked over to me, his gait unsteady from the alcohol. He stood over me, invading my personal space, and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Good girl, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. I knew you would come to your senses. It takes a big person to admit they were wrong, Sophia. We are all really proud of you for turning back from the edge. He squeezed my shoulder a little too hard. Now when we bring the papers out later, I want you to sign them quickly, he whispered, leaning down so his breath hit my ear. Do not make a scene. Do not try to read the fine print. Just sign it and apologize to your dad, and we can all go back to being a happy family. I might even let you keep your access to the guest house if you are good. I looked up at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the arrogance in his watery blue eyes. He truly believed he had won. He believed that my presence here was a surrender. I gently reached up and removed his hand from my shoulder as if I were picking off a piece of lint. "I am not here to make a scene, Tyler," I said, my voice calm and even. "I am here to ensure that Grandpa's wishes are respected." Tyler laughed. A loud barking sound. "That is exactly what we are doing. We are respecting the wishes of the family. You are finally learning your place." He walked away, raising his glass to my father, who nodded approvingly from across the room. The trap was set. They thought I was the mouse. They did not know I was the exterminator. The tension in the room ratcheted up as my father cleared his throat and stood up. The whispers died down. This was the main event. The moment they had all been waiting for. "Family, friends, thank you all for coming," my father said, his voice trembling with emotion. "As you know, my father Elijah has been struggling lately. His mind is not what it used to be. And recent events have shown us that we need to secure the family assets to ensure he is taken care of properly." He gestured to Tyler, who produced the folder containing the fraudulent power of attorney documents. "We have drawn up some papers that will transfer the guardianship and financial control to Tyler and myself," my father continued. "It is a heavy burden, but we are willing to carry it, and I am happy to say that Sophia is here to give her blessing." All eyes turned to me. The pressure was physical. It pressed against my chest. They wanted me to nod. They wanted me to bow my head and accept my defeat. I stood up slowly. I picked up my briefcase. I felt the weight of the evidence inside. It was heavy, but it felt like a shield. I walked to the center of the room. I stood next to Grandpa Elijah's wheelchair. He was still sitting with his head bowed, his hands resting quietly in his lap. No one was paying attention to him. They were all looking at the papers in Tyler's hand. "Sophia," my mother said, her voice sharp, "just sign the papers, dear. Let us get this over with so we can have cake." I looked at my mother. I looked at the aunts who had called me stingy. I looked at the cousins who judged my dress. And I looked at Tyler, who was holding the pen out to me like a weapon. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that has just been invited into the sheep pen. "I think we should wait," I said. "Wait for what?" Tyler snapped. "We have waited long enough. Sign the damn paper." I looked down at my grandfather. I saw his finger twitch. I saw his breathing change. He was ready. "I am not signing anything," I said, "and neither is he. But before you get upset, I think you should hear what the actual owner of this estate has to say." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Oh God, here we go again with the senile old man routine. He does not have anything to say, Sophia. He does not even know what day it is." I placed my hand on Grandpa's shoulder. "Grandpa," I said clearly, "they are ready for you now." The room went deadly silent. For a second, nothing happened. Then slowly, deliberately, Grandpa Elijah lifted his head. He did not look confused. He did not look weak. He looked furious. The transformation was so sudden that Aunt Sarah gasped and dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the floor, but no one looked at it. They were too busy looking at the man they had written off. Grandpa Elijah looked at Tyler. He looked at the papers. And then he spoke. His voice was not the whisper of an invalid. It was the roar of a lion. "I know exactly what day it is, Tyler," he said. "It is the day you get the hell out of my house." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that has just detonated and sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Tyler dropped the pen. My mother grabbed her chest. And I just stood there in my red dress and watched the world burn. The sound of my grandfather telling Tyler to get out of his house should have been the end of the argument. In any sane world, that command from the patriarch would have sent shivers down their spines. But my family did not live in a sane world. They lived in a world constructed of denial and greed, and when reality tried to break in, they simply shouted louder to drown it out. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then my mother Brenda let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. It was a sharp, piercing sound that shattered the moment of truth. She threw herself onto the ottoman next to Grandpa, ignoring his glare, and grabbed his hand, clutching it to her chest. "Oh, Daddy!" she sobbed, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of Broadway. "Look at what she has done to you. Look at how confused you are. You do not mean that. You do not want Tyler to leave. Tyler is the only one helping us. It is Sophia. It is that poison she has been whispering in your ear." She turned to face the room of relatives, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive foundation. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is what I was trying to protect you all from," she screamed. "This is why we need the power of attorney. Sophia has not just abandoned us. She has been stealing from him." A collective gasp went through the room. The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. I did not flinch. I sat perfectly still in my red dress, lifting my wineglass to my lips. The Merlot was dry and rich, and I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the silence stretch out, letting her lie expand until it filled every corner of the room. "Stealing!" Aunt Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Surely not. Sophia has her own money. That is what she wants you to think," my mother yelled, standing up now, fueling herself with her own fabrication. "Where do you think her money comes from? She is a single woman. How does she afford that mansion? How does she afford those cars? She says she is a CFO, but have you ever seen her office? Number. She has been siphoning money from Dad's accounts for years. She tricked him into signing things when his mind started to go. She has been living like a queen on his legacy while we struggle to buy groceries. It was a breathtaking lie. It was so audacious that I almost admired the creativity. She was taking her own financial crimes and projecting them onto me. She knew that if she painted me as a thief, it would justify everything they had done. It would justify the stolen credit cards. It would justify the exclusion. It would make them the heroes reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. Tyler saw his opening. He realized that the only way to recover from Grandpa's rebuke was to double down on the narrative that the old man was mentally incompetent. He stepped forward, smoothing his suit jacket, trying to regain his composure. "Brenda is right," Tyler announced, his voice booming with false authority. "We did not want to make this public. We wanted to handle this quietly to save Sophia the embarrassment. But you leave us no choice." He walked over to where I was sitting. He loomed over me, trying to use his height to intimidate me. I did not look up. I just watched the wine swirl in my glass. "We have seen the statements. Sophia Tyler lied. We know about the transfers. You have drained the liquidity from the estate. That is why you are so afraid of me getting power of attorney, because you know that the minute I have forensic accountants look at the books, you are going to jail." The word jail sent a ripple of excitement through the cousins. They were leaning forward, hungry for the drama. They were witnessing the takedown of the successful cousin, the one who made them feel inadequate, and they were loving every second of it. Tyler turned back to Grandpa. He picked up the document from the table. He uncapped the pen again. He knelt down beside the wheelchair, placing himself between Grandpa and me, physically blocking my view. "Grandpa, listen to me," Tyler said, his voice dropping to a condescending soothe. "I know you are confused. I know Sophia has told you terrible lies about us. But we are your family. We are the ones who are here every day. We are the ones who love you. You need to sign this so I can protect you from her. She is a thief, Grandpa. She is trying to leave you penniless." I watched Grandpa's face. He was breathing hard, his nostrils flaring. He looked at Tyler with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. But Tyler kept pushing the paper into his hands, pressing the pen against his fingers. "Just sign right here," Tyler urged. "Just one signature and we can stop her. We can get your money back. We can kick her out and be a happy family again. Just trust me." The atmosphere in the room was pulled tight as a violin string about to snap. My father, Marcus, who had been quiet until now, stood up and walked over to join the circle of pressure. "Do it, Dad," my father said, his voice cracking. "Do not let her win. She thinks she is better than us. She thinks she can buy and sell us. Show her who is boss. Sign the paper." They were surrounding him. 3 vultures circling a man they thought was a carcass. My mother was crying, my father was begging, Tyler was forcing, and the relatives were watching, judging, whispering. I set my wine glass down on the table with a soft click. The sound was small, but in the charged silence it was distinct. I looked at my watch. It was 7:15. The eviction notice I had filed earlier that day had a 24-hour grace period, but I had also arranged for a digital copy to be sent to their emails at exactly 7:30. They had 15 minutes of ignorance left. I looked at Aunt Sarah, who was staring at me with open hostility now. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Sarah hissed at me, "stealing from your own grandfather after all he did for you." I turned my head slowly to look at her. "And you, Aunt Sarah?" I said, my voice calm, but carrying to the back of the room. "You should ask yourself why you are so eager to believe a lie. Is it because it is true, or because it makes you feel better about asking me for $5,000 last Christmas for your roof repair?" Sarah turned beet red. "And you, Tyler?" I continued, shifting my gaze to him. "You talk about forensic accountants. I think that is a wonderful idea. I think we should definitely have someone look at the books, specifically the unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account I shared with my parents. The withdrawals that match the exact price of your new golf clubs and the down payment on that truck you no longer own." Tyler stood up abruptly, turning to face me. His face was twisted with rage. "Shut up," he screamed. "You are lying. You are just trying to confuse him." He turned back to Grandpa, desperate now. He grabbed Grandpa's hand and tried to force the pen into it. "Sign it," Tyler yelled, losing all pretense of kindness. "Sign it now, you old fool, before she ruins everything." My mother stopped crying instantly. She leaned in, her eyes wide and manic. "Make him sign, Tyler. Just grab his hand." It was violence now. It was no longer a family meeting. It was a robbery in progress. They were physically assaulting an 85-year-old man in front of 20 witnesses because they were terrified of the truth. I stood up. I did not rush. I simply stood and smoothed my dress. "That is enough," I said. Tyler ignored me. He was pressing the pen point into the paper so hard it was tearing. Grandpa was pulling his hand back, his face turning red with exertion. I said, "That is enough." I repeated, my voice dropping an octave into the tone I used when I fired incompetent executives. I reached into my briefcase. I bypassed the eviction notice. I bypassed the bank statements. I pulled out a single blue folder. It was old. The edges were worn. It was the original trust document. I walked over to the table. I did not push Tyler away. I simply tossed the blue folder onto the center of the dining table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the polished wood and coming to rest right in front of my father. "You want to talk about stealing?" I asked. "You want to talk about ownership? Go ahead, Dad. Open it. Read the first page. Read the date." My father looked at the folder. He looked at me. He looked at Tyler, who was still wrestling with Grandpa. "What is this?" my father asked, his voice trembling. "It is the reason you are all wasting your time," I said. "It is the reason Tyler can scream and shout and force pens into hands until doomsday, and it will not matter. Open it," I commanded. My father reached out a shaking hand. He flipped open the cover. He read the header. His face went gray. The color drained out of him so fast, I thought he might faint. "What does it say?" Tyler demanded, not letting go of Grandpa's hand. "What is it?" My father looked up. His eyes were hollow. "It says," my father whispered, "it says the Elijah Williams estate was dissolved 5 years ago." "What?" Tyler shouted. "Dissolved. That is impossible." My father swallowed hard. "It says all assets, every property, every account, were transferred into an irrevocable trust." "And who is the trustee?" Tyler screamed. "Who controls it?" My father looked at me. The look was one of pure horror. "Sophia," he whispered. "It is Sophia. She owns everything. She has owned everything for 5 years." The room went silent again, but this time it was the silence of a grave. Tyler let go of Grandpa's hand. The pen clattered to the floor. I picked up my wine glass again. I took another sip. I turned to my grandfather, who was rubbing his wrist where Tyler had grabbed him. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" I asked softly. He looked at me. He nodded. And then he smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I am fine, Sophia," he said, his voice strong. "I was just waiting for you to drop the hammer." I turned back to the frozen room. "The hammer has dropped," I said. "And now we are going to talk about who is stealing from whom. And Tyler, I suggest you pick up that pen. You are going to need it to sign your divorce papers." The silence in the dining room was not empty. It was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. My father Marcus was staring at the blue folder I had tossed onto the table, his hands trembling as if he were holding a live grenade. My mother Brenda had gone pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unable to form words. But Tyler was the only one who refused to accept the shift in atmospheric pressure. He was a man possessed by greed and desperation, and he was not going to let a piece of paper or a revelation stop him from claiming what he believed was his birthright. He turned back to Grandpa Elijah, ignoring the folder entirely. He gripped Grandpa's shoulder with painful force, his knuckles turning white. "Ignore her!" Tyler shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "She is lying, Grandpa. She printed that fake document at home. She is just trying to trick you again. Sign the paper. Do it now. Do not look at her. Look at me. I am the one taking care of you. Sign it." Tyler tried to force the pen back into Grandpa's hand, jamming the plastic barrel against the old man's fingers. It was a violation. It was the ugly, raw face of elder abuse masked as urgency. The aunts and uncles gasped, but no one moved to stop him. They were too paralyzed by the shock of the moment. But they did not need to interfere, because the lion had woken up. Grandpa Elijah did not take the pen. Instead, with a speed and strength that defied his 85 years, he brought his arm up and shoved Tyler backwards. It was a hard, violent push squarely in the chest. Tyler, who was off balance and drunk on his own arrogance, stumbled back, tripping over his own feet and crashing into the sideboard. The expensive vase sitting there wobbled but did not fall. Tyler, however, looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Get your hands off me, boy." The voice that came out of my grandfather's mouth was not the mumbling whisper we had heard for the last year. It was a deep, resonant baritone that shook the crystal glasses on the table. It was the voice of the man who had built a construction empire in the segregated South. It was the voice of authority. Grandpa gripped the arms of his wheelchair. My father started to move forward, perhaps to help him, but Grandpa shot him a look that froze him in his tracks. Slowly, painfully, but with immense dignity, Grandpa pushed himself up. He stood. He stood straight, his spine uncurling from the hunch he had adopted as a disguise. He towered over the table. He was 6 feet tall, and in that moment he looked like a giant. He smoothed his suit jacket. He adjusted his cuffs. And then he looked around the room, making eye contact with every single person who had dismissed him. "You all think I am deaf," Grandpa said, his voice steady and cold. "You think because my legs are tired, my brain is soft. You think you can talk about me like I am a piece of furniture in my own house." He turned his gaze to my mother. Brenda shrank back into her chair, terrified. "I heard you," Brenda, Grandpa said, pointing a long finger at her. "I heard you on the phone with your friends complaining that I was taking too long to die. I heard you telling them that you had already picked out the curtains for my bedroom once I was gone." My mother let out a choked sob, but Grandpa did not stop. He turned to my father. "And you, Marcus, my own son. I sat right there in that chair and watched you let your son-in-law insult me. I watched you hand over your dignity to a man who has never worked an honest day in his life. You sat there and planned how to carve up my legacy while I was sitting right in front of you eating my oatmeal." Then he turned to Tyler, who was picking himself up off the floor, his face a mask of shock and rage. And you, Grandpa said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You think you are the man of this house. You think you are the protector. Grandpa laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I am old, Tyler, but I am not stupid. I saw what you did last week. I saw my granddaughter call this house from an ambulance. I saw her begging for help because she was bleeding internally. And I saw you laugh. I saw you tell my daughter to ignore her. I saw you pack your bags and leave for a concert while Sophia lay on an operating table. The room was deadly quiet. The relatives looked at each other uneasy. They had heard the rumors, but hearing it confirmed by the patriarch was different. You abandoned her! Grandpa shouted, his voice rising. You abandoned the only person in this family who has ever put a single dime of honest money into this household. You left her to die so you could drink champagne and pretend to be rich. Tyler sputtered, his face turning red. We did not know it was serious. She is always dramatic. We were just trying to live our lives. Live your lives, Grandpa mocked. You are not living your lives. You are living her life. Grandpa swept his arm across the room, encompassing the furniture, the art on the walls, the very roof over our heads. You want to talk about stealing? You accuse Sophia of stealing from me. Let me tell you something that is going to keep you awake for the rest of your miserable life. He walked over to the table and slammed his hand down on the blue folder. This house, Grandpa announced. The one you are sitting in, the one you are terrified of losing. I lost this house 10 years ago. I made bad investments. The bank was coming to foreclose on Monday morning. I was going to be on the street. Do you know who saved it? He pointed at me. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I held my head high. Sophia saved it, Grandpa said. She bought the note from the bank. She paid off the arrears. She put the deed in her name, but she let us stay here because she did not want to embarrass me. She did not want her father to look like a failure. My father put his head in his hands. And the cars, Grandpa continued relentlessly. That truck you drive, Tyler, the one you love more than your wife. Sophia's money, the country club membership. Sophia's money, the groceries in the fridge. Sophia's money. Every stitch of clothing on your backs was paid for by the woman you just tried to humiliate. He leaned in close to Tyler. I do not have any money, Tyler. I retired with a pension and a little savings which you and Brenda spent years ago on vacations I did not want to go on. The only reason the lights are on in this house is because Sophia pays the bill. Tyler looked around the room looking for an escape, looking for a denial, looking for anything to cling to. No, he stammered. That is a lie. The trust. The family trust. There are millions in there. You told me. Grandpa smiled. It was a wolfish smile. There was a trust, he said. You are right about that. I built a fortune in my 40s. And 5 years ago, when I saw how you and Chloe were turning out, when I saw how lazy and entitled you were becoming, I made a decision. He picked up the blue folder and opened it. He held up the document for everyone to see. I transferred everything, Grandpa said, every stock, every bond, every piece of commercial real estate. I moved it all into an irrevocable trust. And do you know who I named as the sole beneficiary and trustee? He looked at me with so much love and pride that my heart ached. Sophia, he said. I gave it all to Sophia, because I knew she would build something with it. And I knew that if I left it to you, you would snort it, eat it, and wear it until there was nothing left. He threw the document down. It slid across the table and stopped right in front of Tyler. So that paper you are holding, Grandpa said, pointing to the crumpled power of attorney form in Tyler's hand. The one you have been trying to force me to sign all night. It is worthless. It gives you power over nothing. It gives you control over a bank account with $0 in it. It is just a piece of trash, Tyler. Just like you. Tyler looked at the paper in his hand. Then he looked at the blue folder. Then he looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him gray and sweating. He looked at Chloe, who was sitting with her mouth open, checking her phone, as if checking to see if her credit card still worked. "It is over," Grandpa said. "The charade is over. I am done playing the senile old man, and I am done watching you bleed my granddaughter dry." He turned to me. "Sophia, honey," he said, his voice softening instantly. "I think you mentioned something about an eviction notice earlier." I stood up and walked over to him, taking his arm. "Yes, Grandpa," I said. "It takes effect at midnight." Grandpa looked at his watch. "Well then," he said, addressing the room. "I suggest you all finish your cake quickly, because in 4 hours the locks are changing, and anyone still inside will be trespassing on my granddaughter's property." He sat back down in his wheelchair, not because he was weak, but because he was finished. He folded his hands in his lap. "I am ready to go now, Sophia," he said. "Take me to your house. The air in here stinks of garbage." I grabbed the handles of his wheelchair. I looked at my family one last time. They were frozen in a tableau of ruin. My mother was sobbing into her hands. My father was staring at the wall. Tyler was looking at the paper in his hand as if it might bite him. I wheeled Grandpa toward the door. The sound of the wheels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. We did not look back. We did not need to. We left them sitting in the wreckage of their own greed, surrounded by cold food and the brutal, absolute truth. The Bank of Sofia was closed, and the eviction of the heartless tenants had officially begun. The dining room descended into absolute chaos the moment the truth settled into the marrow of their bones. For years, my family had operated on a currency of lies and perceived status, but Grandpa Elijah had just devalued their currency to zero. I stood by the door with my hand on the wheelchair handle, watching the implosion of the fake empire I had subsidized for a decade. It was ugly, it was violent, and it was inevitable. Tyler was the first to break. The man who had spent the entire evening posturing as the patriarch suddenly realized he was nothing more than a squatter in a borrowed suit. He looked down at the worthless power of attorney document in his hand, and then he looked up at Chloe. The look in his eyes was not love, it was not concern. It was the look of a con artist who realizes he has been conned. He crumpled the paper and threw it at her face. "You lied to me!" Tyler screamed, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "You told me your family was loaded. You told me the old man was sitting on millions and that we just had to wait for him to kick the bucket." Chloe flinched as the paper ball hit her cheek. She looked terrified, shrinking back into her chair. "I did not know," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought he still owned the land. He never told us he transferred it." "You are useless," Tyler roared, stepping toward her. He ignored the shocked gasps of the aunts and uncles. "You dragged me into this family. You made me quit my job to manage the estate." "What estate, Chloe?" "There is no estate. You are just a broke little girl playing dress-up." He grabbed the edge of the table and shoved it. The fine china rattled, and a wine glass tipped over, spilling a blood-red stain across the white tablecloth. "I married you because you said you could secure my future," Tyler yelled. "You said I would be a CEO. Now look at me. I am standing here in a suit I cannot afford, about to be kicked out of a house I do not own. You trapped me. You and your pathetic lying parents trapped me." My father Marcus stood up, his face gray and trembling. "Do not talk to my daughter like that, Tyler," my father said, but his voice lacked any real power. Tyler spun around on him. "Shut up, old man. You are the worst of them all. You sat there and let me do your dirty work because you were too much of a coward to steal from your own father. You are pathetic. You are all pathetic." The brutality of his words hung in the air. This was the man they had championed. This was the son-in-law they had chosen over their own daughter. The mask had fallen off, and underneath was nothing but a grifter who had run out of road. Suddenly there was a thud. My mother, Brenda, who had been hyperventilating in her chair, slumped forward. Her head hit the table with a sickening sound, and then her body slid sideways, collapsing onto the floor. Brenda, Aunt Sarah, screamed, dropping to her knees beside her. For a moment I thought it was another act. My mother was famous for her strategic fainting spells whenever a bill collector called or she lost an argument. But as I looked at her lying on the Persian rug, her skin pale and clammy, I realized this was real. This was the shock of losing her social standing, the terror of poverty, and the humiliation of being exposed had caused her system to shut down. "Call 911, Uncle Ray shouted, fumbling for his phone. My father dropped to his knees beside her, patting her cheek frantically. "Brenda, wake up! Brenda, please!" I watched them. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like watching a stranger on the news. I did not move to help. I was not a doctor. I was not her caretaker. I was the landlord, and I had business to finish. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the white envelopes I had prepared. I walked over to the table, stepping around the chaos of my mother's unconscious form. I placed the envelopes down on the stained tablecloth right next to where my father was kneeling. "You can call the ambulance," I said, my voice cutting through the panic. "But while you are waiting, you need to read this." My father looked up at me, tears in his eyes. "Sophia, your mother is unconscious. How can you be so cold?" "I am not being cold, Dad," I said. "I am being practical. That envelope contains a formal eviction notice. It states that Marcus and Brenda Williams, along with any other unauthorized occupants, have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises located at 45 Elm Street." My father stared at me, as if I had grown a second head. "You are kicking us out. But where will we go?" "That is not my problem," I said. "You have 30 days. I suggest you use them to find a rental that fits your actual budget. I will be listing this property for sale on the 1st of the month. The realtor will be coming by on Monday to take photos, so I expect the place to be clean." I turned away from him and focused my attention on Tyler. He was standing by the window, breathing heavily, his face twisted into a snarl. He looked like a cornered animal. "And you," I said, stepping toward him, "you do not get 30 days. You are not on the lease. You are a guest who has overstayed his welcome by about 5 years." I held out my hand. "The keys." "Tyler, give me the keys to my truck." Tyler laughed, a manic sound that lacked any humor. "You are crazy if you think I am walking out of here," he spat. "That is my truck. I customized it. I put money into it." "You put my money into it," I corrected him. "And now I am taking it back. Hand them over or I will report it stolen. The title is in my name, the insurance is in my name. To the law, you are just a car thief in a cheap suit." Tyler's eyes darted around the room. He saw the judgment on the faces of the relatives. He saw his wife crying in the corner. He saw his mother-in-law passed out on the floor. He realized he had lost the audience. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key fob. He held it tightly, his knuckles white. "You want the keys?" he sneered. "Fine." He drew his arm back as if to throw them at my face. But then a darker look crossed his eyes. He lunged. He did not throw the keys. He charged at me. His hands were curled into fists, and he let out a guttural roar of frustration. "I am going to kill you," he screamed. "You ruined everything." The aunt screamed. My father shouted, but I did not flinch. I did not step back, because I knew something they did not. I knew that 5 minutes ago, when Grandpa dropped the bomb, I had sent a text message to the private security detail I had hired to wait outside. Just as Tyler reached me, the front door burst open. "Police, drop it." 2 uniformed officers and 2 private security guards stormed into the room. They moved with a speed and efficiency that was terrifying to behold. Tyler froze mid-lunge, his fist raised. He looked at the officers, and the color drained from his face for the second time that night. "Step away from her," the lead officer commanded, his hand resting on his holster. Tyler slowly lowered his hand. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw true fear in his eyes. He realized that I was not playing a game. I had anticipated his violence. I had prepared for his rage. I was 10 steps ahead. The officer stepped forward and grabbed Tyler's arm, twisting it behind his back. "Tyler Davis, you are being detained for attempted assault and making terroristic threats," the officer said as he clicked the handcuffs onto Tyler's wrists. "You cannot do this," Tyler yelled, struggling against the grip. "This is a family matter. She provoked me." It ceased to be a family matter when you raised your fist against the property owner, I said calmly. I walked over to where the officer was holding him. I reached into Tyler's pocket and pulled out the keys he had refused to give up. Thank you, officer, I said. I would like to press charges, and I want him removed from the property immediately. Get him out of here. The officer nodded to his partner. They dragged Tyler toward the door. He was kicking and screaming, shouting obscenities at Chloe, at me, at the world. Chloe, I am divorcing you, he screamed as they hauled him out. You are worthless. Do you hear me? Worthless. Chloe sobbed louder, curling into a ball in her chair. The room fell silent again, save for the sound of my mother's ragged breathing and the distant siren of the approaching ambulance. I stood in the center of the wreckage. The dining table was a mess. The family was shattered. The false idols had been toppled. I looked at the relatives. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They realized now that the power had shifted. The bank was closed, and the new management was not accepting excuses. I turned to the officer who remained. Please ensure that everyone else leaves the property once the ambulance departs, I said. I will be taking my grandfather home with me. He is the only family I have left. I walked back to the wheelchair where Grandpa Elijah sat. He was watching me with a look of profound pride. He reached out and took my hand, giving it a firm squeeze. You did good, kid, he whispered. You cleaned house. I smiled at him. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. Let us go home, Grandpa, I said. I pushed his wheelchair out of the room, past my weeping father, past my unconscious mother, and out into the cool night air. The flashing lights of the police car illuminated the driveway, casting long shadows against the house that was no longer a home. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. The empire of lies had fallen, and from the rubble I was going to build something real. 30 days is a strange amount of time. In the grand scheme of the universe, it is nothing but a blink of an eye. But in the timeline of my life, the last 30 days have been an era of reconstruction. The calendar on my wall says it has been exactly 1 month since the night of the dinner party, the night the police escorted Tyler out in handcuffs, and the night I wheeled my grandfather out of a house that was drowning in lies. I am sitting on the terrace of my new home. It is a sprawling villa in a gated community on the north side of the city, far away from the toxic memories of Elm Street. The morning sun is filtering through the oak trees, dappling the stone patio in warm light. The air smells of jasmine and freshly cut grass. For the first time in 10 years, the air does not smell of obligation. It does not smell of fear. The house on Elm Street is gone. I listed it the morning after the dinner. I priced it to move quickly because I did not want to hold on to the bricks and mortar of my past a moment longer than necessary. It sold in 2 weeks to a young couple who knew nothing of the screaming matches and the betrayal that had soaked into the walls. My parents vacated the property 3 days before closing. I did not go to say goodbye. My lawyer handled the walkthrough. He told me they took everything that wasn't nailed down, including the light bulbs. I told him I didn't care. They could have the light bulbs. I had the sun. My parents are now living in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Without my credit cards and without the monthly allowance, their lifestyle has collapsed like a soufflé in a cold oven. I hear through the grapevine that my father has had to come out of retirement to work as a greeter at a hardware store. I hear my mother has been banned from her spa because her check bounced. I do not feel happy about their struggle, but I do not feel guilty either. I feel neutral. It is the neutrality of a banker watching a bad investment finally be written off the books. My phone buzzes on the glass table beside me. I pick it up and look at the screen. It is a number I do not recognize, but I have an instinct about who it is. I slide my finger across the screen to answer. Hello, I say, my voice calm. Sophia, is that you? It is Chloe. Her voice is ragged thick with tears and panic. It is the same voice she used when she wanted money for concert tickets. It is the same voice she used when she lied on the live stream. Please do not hang up, Chloe sobs. I am at a Starbucks using their Wi-Fi because my phone service got cut off. Sophia, it is a nightmare. Tyler filed for divorce. I take a sip of my iced tea. I am not surprised. Tyler was a parasite looking for a host. Once he realized the host was dry, he moved on. He served me papers this morning. Chloe continues, her words tumbling out over each other. He is trying to take the car. He is saying I defrauded him. Sophia, I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad do not have room for me in their apartment. I am sitting here with 3 suitcases. Please, Sophia. I know you have a big house, just for a few weeks, until I get back on my feet. I will do anything. I will help with the twins. I look out across the lawn. I see Mrs. Higgins pushing Maya on the swing set. I see the peace that surrounds my children, helping with the twins. The audacity is breathtaking. This is the woman who left those same twins at a daycare center while she went to a concert. This is the woman who watched me bleed and called me dramatic. Chloe, I say gently. Yes, Sophia, please. I am your sister. No, you are not, I say firmly. A sister is someone who shows up. A sister is someone who protects. You are just a woman I share DNA with. Sophia. Please, she wails. You are 28 years old, Chloe. You have a degree I paid for. You have limbs that work. I suggest you use them. Go to a shelter. Go to a friend. Go to work. But do not come here. But I have nobody, she screams. I know how that feels, I say. I felt that way in the ambulance. Goodbye, Chloe. I hang up the phone. I do not feel a pang of regret. I go into the settings and block the number. Then I block the entire area code just to be safe. It is the final stitch in the wound. The surgery is complete. I stand up and walk down the stone steps onto the grass. I walk toward the large oak tree in the center of the yard. Under the shade of its branches sits a chessboard set up on a small table. Grandpa Elijah is sitting there. He looks 10 years younger than he did a month ago. The hunch in his back is gone. His eyes are bright and alert. He is wearing a polo shirt and linen trousers, looking every bit the retired tycoon he is. Sitting across from him is Leo. My 4-year-old son is staring intently at the board, his brow furrowed in concentration. Grandpa watches him with a patience that is infinite. He does not rush him. He does not look at his phone. He is fully present. Move the knight, Leo Grandpa whispers. Protect the king. Always protect the king. Leo reaches out his small hand and moves the piece. Grandpa smiles, and it is a smile that lights up the entire yard. Good job, boy, Grandpa says. You are seeing the whole board now. Never let them corner you. I stand there watching them, and my heart swells so big I think it might burst. This is it. This is what I was fighting for. This is what I was paying for all those years, but never receiving. I realize now that I spent my entire adult life trying to buy love from people who were emotionally bankrupt. I thought that if I just gave enough, if I was just successful enough, they would finally value me. But value is not something you can negotiate with a narcissist. I look at Maya laughing as she swings higher. I look at Leo learning strategy from the man who built an empire. I look at Grandpa who found his voice again the moment he realized I needed him. This is my family. Family is not the people who share your last name. Family is not the people who appear in your holiday photos. Family are the people who answer the phone when you are in the back of an ambulance. Family are the people who hold your hand when you are scared, not the ones who tell you to stop being dramatic. Family are the people who cheer for your success, not the ones who try to take credit for it. I walked into that hospital a month ago thinking I was losing everything. I thought I was broken. I thought I was alone. But as I stand here in the sunlight, I realize that the surgery did more than just remove a ruptured cyst. It removed the cancer that had been eating away at my life for decades. I walked in a victim. I walked out a survivor. And now standing here in my own sanctuary, I am finally just Sophia. Not the bank, not the scapegoat, not the fixer, just Sophia. Grandpa looks up and sees me watching. He waves me over. Come here, Sophia, he calls out. Leo is beating me. I need reinforcements. I laugh, a sound that comes from deep in my belly. I walk over and sit down on the grass beside them. I wrap my arms around my knees and watch the game. The wind rustles the leaves. The world is quiet. The world is safe. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Home. This journey taught me that true family is not defined by DNA, but by who stands beside you when you fall. For years, I believed that money could buy affection, and that sacrifice would earn respect. I was wrong. My surgery didn't just heal my body, it healed my perspective. It forced me to cut out the toxic roots that were draining my life. I learned that your value is not found in what you provide for others, but in who you are. Walking away from toxicity wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. If this story of resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power. Share this with someone who needs to know they are not alone. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose your peace over your family? Thank you for watching.